Hamakua aloha mahalo. E ho mai kai. I kia hale. A me kia po'imanu. Mama. Blessings to this place and all these people gathered here. My name is Serge Kahili King, and I represent an organization called Aloha International that does these kinds of meetings and lots of other stuff. Let's have an informal greeting. As most all of you know, we say the word for a greeting in Hawaiian is aloha. And we use it as good and hello and goodbye. But it's important you know that what it really means is love. And so every time we're saying aloha, we're giving each other a blessing of love, whether we're greeting or whether we're saying goodbye. Okay, so, and we don't shout it out like the tour guides do, okay? It's just kind of nice and soft and gentle. Aloha. Aloha. Maikai, maikai. That means good. Good, thank you. What we'd like to do is begin with a blessing before we start anything else. And we have one of our staff, Lois, here. Please do that.
Can you tell I'm a volcano? I've got a turtleneck. Okay. The talk today is about getting older. I guess it's no matter what age you are. This chant kind of is a chant to wake you up. And wake you up and come alive. Don't be such a sleepyhead. Get out there and doing things. It's a chant that we often chant at Hauma'u at the crater's edge, chant to greet the sun. And it's a song that is so beautiful in that Pele would only be awakened by her younger sister. And she gently wakes her sister up. So maybe we all need a wake-up call. And may we join in this one tonight. Aloha kalai kawaene kalapunono ikamakau kalehua ua hiolani pele ua maali e nawe ke nakapoki e aloha.
Mahalo, mahalo. True. All right. Now what we do is we begin with a legend, an ancient legend, somehow related to the topic of the day. Okay. The legend we're going to talk about today is the legend of the rocks of Kana. Now, thank you. I was upside down. Ikawakahiko, Mamualoa o Kapena Kuke. Once upon a time, long before Captain Cook, there lived on the island of Molokai a man named Hakalani Leo. And he had a most beautiful wife, and her name was Huna. And they were actually traveling, finally decided to settle down in a beautiful valley. Now it's got a different name here, this valley, Pelekunu, along the north shore of Molokai. Now Molokai is a kind of a long island like this. And on the north shore it's almost all steep cliffs down to the ocean. And the area we're talking about is, well, here's the end of this end, from you looking at it, of Molokai, and along this end is about 20 miles of steep cliffs that are, they range from about 800 to 2,000 feet high, sheer cliffs right straight into the water. It's broken by a few valleys. One of the valleys is Pelekunu. So that's where this couple decided to settle. Now, if we're looking at it, that was looking at a map. If we're looking at it this way, along the coast here, where all these breaks in the mountains for valleys, the place we're talking about is a valley that's right next to this really high ridge. It's called Haupo, or Haupu. And So they settled in there, and they were very happy getting to know the people in the area. On top of the ridge was the domain of a chief. Now, the chief's name was Kahili. We're not going to call him that all the time. We're just going to call him Kape'e, kind of a short nickname. And for Haka, we're going to call the other guy Haka. So anyway, up on the cliff, Kape'e hears about this beautiful woman that has come to live in the valley below his ridge. Well, of course, he's very interested in that. But, you know, he's really big. He's really strong. He's the chief of the area. And he's very, very hairy. Okay? And so he says he wants his children to go down to talk to this beautiful woman and bring her back to be his wife. Well, now she's already the wife of Haka. But in ancient Hawaii, that was a kind of a loose kind of a thing. It wasn't proper to take away somebody's wife. But if you could get away with it, okay, you'd do it. So Kape'e was very powerful. He sent his children down to talk to her. And he's a powerful chief. Now, Haka is also what they call an ali'i, part of the aristocracy, but not as high and certainly not as powerful as Kape'e. So the children come down and they talk to Hina and they said, you know, our father, the ali'i of the area, wants you to become and live with him. And she says, well, okay, I've heard about him and I know he's pretty hairy. So if he'll get rid of all his hair, why, I'll be happy to come and live with him. So when Kape'e heard that, why, he called all the retainers from around his, the Hawaiians didn't really live in villages, they lived in compounds, but all the people in the area, he called the ones that needed to come, and he lay down and he had them all start shaving and plucking his hair. And so finally, after a while, he was completely clear of hair, and so he sent his children down to tell Hina, and Hina says, okay, I'm off. So she goes up with the children, up from the valley, up onto the ridge, to be with Kape'e. Well, you can imagine, Haka is really upset, okay? That somebody would steal his wife, and not only his wife, but the most beautiful woman around. So he decides to go off looking for a hero to help him get his wife back. And this was an old days, a time when there were heroes of many kinds in the land of Hawaii, in different places. So he goes looking for a hero. First one he comes across as he's traveling, looking for one, is Kamalalawalu. I'm not even going to try and translate that one for you. Here's the reason. Sometimes in Hawaiian names, the name is directly related to something in the story or to a place or to a quality, but not in the oldest legends. This is a very old legend. In the oldest legends, they give a name like the name would be given normally, which is a short form of the full name. So let's say that somebody was called, they might be called Keali'i o Kalani. Now that's real short, but let's say that they were called that. Well, nobody wants to keep saying that all the time. So they'll call him Lani. And so somebody says, well, what does Lani mean? Lani means heaven. Okay. They're going to call a guy heaven? No. His full name is probably some historical event that happened to one of his ancestors, or something that happened in his life that was of great significance, and it might be quite long. And so that would be his full name, but nobody's going to go saying that all the time. Well, it's the same way when we hear these stories, especially the ones that were translated to Haoles, and they're going to just give them the nickname, not the full thing. So that's why you can't really translate these. Some people like to know what it means, but you can't all the time. It doesn't work. So we're dealing with Kamalalawalu. And so he's a hero, and these heroes always had some kind of magical power, magical ability. And so this one, half of his body was stone, and half of his body was flesh. And to prove his power and his strength, he takes this big rock, throws it up on the air, and puts his stone side to it as it comes down, and wham! Well, that would be very impressive, except, now remember, we got Haka looking at this, and he's saying, I noticed how that side of your body trembled when the rock hit you. You're not strong enough, I'm sorry. Not to take on Kapei. So he goes off, goes looking for another hero. Next hero he comes is called Nuku. Well, that was a fast one, because Nuku says, you're talking about Haupu? Ah, that's impossible. Nobody can defeat that. He said, he wouldn't even talk to him. Okay. On he goes. Finds a hero called Kaulu. And now Kaulu has a very special power. He shows off his strength by grabbing a river and stopping it right in its course. And Haka looks at that and says, well, that's nice, but I don't see how that's going to help me. And he's right. So off he goes, and he tries hero after hero. Nobody's strong enough, nobody has the right kind of thing, whatever. Finally, he learns about some old guy living in another valley over in Halawa. Now Halawa, if we look at Molokai, it's on this end. There's a bay, and if you go inland, there's its gorgeous waterfall, deep valley. And so he goes, and this guy's name is Kana, but he's an old man. And so Haka makes his way there anyway, and he talks to Kana, and he tells him what he needs, and Kana says, well, I was just about to give up and die, but this guy, Kapei, sounds like somebody who's worthy of my power. And so he decides to get active again and take care of Kapei for Haka. Because this is a great adventure, he gets to show his strength and do his thing. He's a hero, that's what he does. It would be like, these are like the superheroes of ancient Hawaii. Well, his particular ability, he was called something that's quite popular in a number of old legends. And it's very hard to, it's difficult, you have to know a lot about the language and the legends to try and understand. Nevertheless, he was a stretching kahuna. He had the ability to stretch his body out and to distant places. So, first thing he does, he stretches his body out, goes into the forest with his hands, you know, leaves his body here, reaching out with his arms and his hands, works for a while with his fingers, and pulls out a canoe. So he gets the canoe, he puts it, goes down to the bay at Halawa, gets the canoe and makes himself a paddle really quickly, goes up, gets another tree, brings it down, makes a paddle, and he takes off. Now, what's coming around is you've got a out of the bay, and there's a point, and then you come around the point and you head down this 20-mile stretch. Haupu is almost at the end of it, and so he's sailing that way. Well, Kapei, of course, has heard of Kana, didn't even know he was alive anymore, but when he heard he was coming, well, he sets off his defenses. So the first thing is, Kana's paddling along, and the first thing that comes up is this huge wall of water. Well, before he left, Kana, being wise in the ways of heroism, brought along what we would call a magic wand. And this wand is called in the translation Wa Kailani, okay, Wa Kailani, which again doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Usually the short names for special weapons and things did have a special meaning, but I think this one was mistranslated because of the things that he does with it. Probably a proper translation would be heavenly time and space would be a better translation. Anyway, that was his magic wand. So he gets his magic wand out when he's sailing in the canoe, gives a heavy stroke to this wall of water, and it breaks up into mist. And he paddles on. Next thing that comes up is this monstrous shark comes out of the deep, starting to attack him. Smacks him with the wand, kills the shark sinks down. Next thing coming along is this giant turtle. Smacks him with the wand, down he goes. Then he comes up to these reefs that were set there especially to block him. And the canoe gets stuck on the reef. So, what to do? He takes his magic wand and he hits the reef. And all the rock crumbles and the canoe is freed. So on he goes. He got nothing in his way now. And he paddles and sails all the way to Haupu. And he gets down to the base of the cliff. And there, way up on top, this is Kape'e and his men. And so Kana stands up in his canoe. And he's got terrific balance, obviously. If anybody's ever been in an outrigger canoe, you know what terrific balance is needed. So he stands up in the canoe and he stretches. And he stretches up until he's even with the top. But that's not good enough. He can't really overpower him unless he's taller. So he stretches up taller. While down, looking up, here's all the men, and they're starting to panic, and Kape'e is there saying, well, got to change this. So Kape'e has magic. He had a magical kamani tree. Now, I don't know the technology of this, but what he did was he runs to his magical kamani tree, and he prunes it, which means he cuts off some branches. And somehow, this makes the ridge grow taller. And so Kana is growing taller, and the ridge is growing taller, and Kana is growing taller, and the ridge is growing taller. Well, finally Kana is stretched out as thin as a spider web, and he realizes he's been defeated. He can't win at this rate. And so he falls way back down into the sea and onto the land, and just rests there for a while, and Kape'e is strutting around, feeling real powerful. And then Kana remembers he's the foster son of the goddess Uli, and she's a goddess of magic. So she lives on Big Island. And so he stretches his body out across the ocean to reach Big Island, leaves his feet on Molokai, his head's over here on Big Island, and Uli feeds him until he becomes nice and fat and muscular and strong again. So then he brings his body back. But before that's finished, Uli tells him about the kamani tree. So next time Kana comes around the cliff at night, just stretches enough to reach the kamani tree, smacks it with his magic wand, it falls into dust, and then he goes to sleep. Next morning, he has his canoe out there in the water, stands up in the canoe, starts stretching out, and Kape'e runs to his kamani tree. There's no kamani tree. And Kana's stretching and stretching until he overpowers the whole thing, and it's real not specific on details, and probably we don't want to really hear those, but he's victorious. And he defeats Kape'e, and he defeats all the men, gets Hina back, brings her back to Haka, and those two live happily ever after until the next Hina story. That's another story. But he goes back, and he's really, really happy because it was active, and he got alive again, and he felt good, and he goes home to rest and wait for his next adventure. Pipi holo ke ka'au. So goes the tale. Okay? Now, that's the story of Kana. Oh, the rocks of Kana. How could I forget the rocks? The reason why we know the story is true is because just before Kana left, he figures he doesn't want this happening anymore. So while he's really big, he kicks and breaks up the ridge, knocks off huge pieces of it, and they fall into the ocean. And if you go to Haupu Ridge today, on the north shore of Molokai, you can see these pieces sticking up out of the water. Okay, some of them even 100 feet high. And so you know the story is true. So back we are now, where we get into the topic for the day. Now the topic is how to grow older without growing old. And big distinction there, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about. When I was in Africa, I spent 7 years in Africa with this wonderful angel of mine. My job was to, most of my job was to go out in the bush and set up projects, community development type projects with the villagers so I was out in the bush a lot, in the jungles, in the desert, and that kind of a thing. Well, when I was based in Senegal, I was doing this a lot. I went into the Sahara and then the deep jungles of the south, did lots of stuff. And I felt I was in pretty good shape. I was in my late 20s. And so in addition to being an ex-Marine, I did a lot of hikes and treks and really thought I was on it all. Well, I got a request to check out a project in a small country called the Gambia. And just to give you sort of, if we're on the outer, there's that big hump of Africa, if we're looking at a map on the ocean. And on the end over here is Dakar. And well, we bring that up. As the Senegalese, it's called Senegal, that country. And as they used to say, like an arrow into its heart was the former British colony of the Gambia that followed the Gambia River. And it was still, still had the British background. Senegal was French based and the Gambia was British based, but they were independent countries. So anyway, in the Gambia, I went down there to check the project out. The guy in charge of the project was an old Dutchman. I mean an old Dutchman. He was in his 80s, white hair, slim, wiry, you'd have to call him. And so after we met, he told me a little bit about the project, and he says, it's in the deep forest. Are you willing to take a trek? I smiled. Sure. Off he goes, and I'm following. I'm trying to follow. This guy didn't walk through the forest, he ran. And I had to run after him so I didn't get lost. And he leaped over streams, and he leaped over logs, and he's just, whoa. And I'm puffing and doing my best. At least I have a lot of endurance, but he really wore me out. It's one of the toughest treks I've ever been on, and I've been on some doozies. Well, we finally got to the place. It was a great project, and so I did fund it. And I learned how to take a bath in a cup of water. I'll never forget that. But the main thing I learned was this phrase that I tell people once in a while: age is not a measure of decrepitude. Okay? It doesn't just because, no matter how old you are, if you're falling apart, it's not because of your age. Okay? This guy showed that beautifully. Now, there's a dictionary definition I ran across. Picked up a dictionary, looked at it, and listened to what it has to say. Where's that? Okay, here we go. There's a dictionary definition of old. Okay? And it said, oh, here we are. Okay. The dictionary says it refers to having the characteristics of showing the signs of age, as in marble, now so old that it has turned gray and chipped. Now, folks, marble is millions, if not billions of years old. There's nothing about chipped that marble has to have to be considered old. And yet, this is the conventional way of thinking about people of a certain age. The medical profession, and this is not putting down all the great doctors and nurses and the wonderful work they do, but they have this idea that the body's a machine. It's a very old idea, and it still continues. And that as a machine ages, it inevitably breaks down. And though that's how so many of us are taught to think about our bodies, it's going to happen. The eyesight is going to go, and the muscles are going to get flabby, and you're going to get weak, and you're going to get sick, and okay? And so you're going to need drugs to keep you going. You're going to need maybe surgery sometimes. You're going to have to replace some parts possibly, and you got to accept that. But do we really have to accept that? Because all those things about the malfunctioning of the body, if you pay attention and look at your life and the lives of others, they happen at any age. At any age. Adolescence, childhood, adulthood, elderhood. I just made that one up, but we don't have one for that. It can happen anytime. And so yes, having the kind of skills that will, and knowledge and information and technology that will enable you to have drugs when they're needed, enable you to replace parts if you have to, enable you to, to do the things that have to be fixed. It's good to be able to do that, but it isn't an inevitable factor of age, because like I said, it happens at any age. So, how can we grow older without growing old and chipped and all that kind of stuff? I'm going to give you some ideas. These ideas come from the philosophy that we teach. The philosophy is called Huna. Now, Huna is a Hawaiian word that in this context has to do with esoteric knowledge. We're not going to talk too esoterically today. That's only a part of the knowledge. But it's a knowledge about a way of thinking about how things work and don't work, about life and about putting that into practical ways. So we're going to talk about some practical things here about this process. That's the topic. This is based on 7 ideas that I was taught in my family. Now, I was adopted by a Hawaiian family. My father before me also. We were both trained in this knowledge. And so what I'm sharing comes from this family. Right? The Kahilis. And so this knowledge is based on what they taught me. My uncle, who taught me these ideas as ideas, had 7 ideas that I translated into English so we can understand and use them better. First idea is that the world is what you think it is. Well, I'm going to give you here a little expanded version, because we have to understand that the world is also not what you think it is. And that has to be, because that's the only way we can change. And what do you change? Well, if the world is what you think it is, and the world is not what you think it is, if you want to change your experience at any given time, you got to change your thinking. And that's what I'm going to give you several ways of doing this based on these other principles or ideas. Okay? The second one says there are no limits. The paradox of that is that there are limits. And there have to be limits. But there also have to be no limits. Now let's look at that for a moment. What does that mean? It means, for instance, if you want to play football on Super Bowl Sunday, okay, you have to define a game with its rules and define a date, none of which exist naturally in nature. Okay? So you have to make up rules that enable you to have this experience. And it's because there are no limits that you can just arbitrarily make up rules about calendars, about games, about anything like this. Well, if you want to change your experience, then one way to do that is to change your rules. And what we mean here, we're defining the beliefs you have about aging, about growing older or growing old, about your body. Those would be good to examine those. What do you really believe about that? But don't think of it in terms of beliefs. That sounds so hard and unchangeable, but it is changeable. Think about them as rules that you've learned, or accepted, or sometimes made up. And because there are no limits, you can change those rules. And when you change those rules, sometimes because your body loves habit, sometimes you have to change them and keep reminding your body of this different way of believing until it's gotten a new habit. And it will follow it if you persist. So examine the rules you have about all this stuff. The next one. Energy flows where attention goes. And attention goes where energy flows. Well, the last one's easy. Anytime there's something super like a game like this, so many people's attention goes to it. But also if there's a disaster, or also if somebody immediately needs help, or our attention is directed to where there is a strong flow of energy, whatever it is. It can be happy energy or not. Our attention is automatically attracted. The other thing is, though, it also means, the other side of it, that if we'll change our focus, we change what we focus on, then we can redirect the energy. Our energy, our physical, emotional, mental energy, and we can influence the energy of others around us. When someone has a real powerful idea or a new exciting technique or experience, why, lots of other people are drawn into that. Well, in working with this one, when we change what we focus, experiments have shown, these experiments have been done, where a group of people in their 60s and 70s were put in an auditorium. Now, this happened a number of years ago, okay? I think this happened in the 80s, maybe. But these people were put in an auditorium, and inside the auditorium, it was all set up like the 1950s. And so they had the music, they had all the kinds of objects and things, and a car or two that were from the 1950s. They had pictures and paintings and photos and all kinds of stuff. And for 2 weeks, they lived in the 1950s. And after that experiment, and nothing else, they weren't told to do anything. They would just live in that environment, dance and sing the old songs and all that, with nothing else to change it. And at the end of that time, they were checked for their physical shape, and every one of them experienced what they called at the time a returning to youth in great measure. Because they were focusing on that time when they were young and they were more active and they did all these kinds of things, and it didn't turn them into teenagers, but it did make their bodies more youthful seeming and improved their functioning and many, many other things from the tests. You can do this kind of thing on your own without having to go to an auditorium, because you have imagination and you have memory. If you can take the time once in a while to really dwell, doesn't have to take long, it could be 5 minutes, to really dwell on the best times, or really imagine some best times being younger, doing things, okay? You're going to affect your body and you're going to feel the difference. We use this in some of our healing as a technique, and you do feel the difference, okay? But you got to focus. So that's one other thing. There's a fourth idea. Now is the moment of power, and although I don't think my uncle studied quantum physics, the next part of the statement is like that, and all moments are now. Okay? Well, okay, how is this practical? Well, you can change your experience by changing your feelings. Now, the fascinating thing about feelings is feelings don't exist in the past or the future. Feelings always exist now. You might have feelings about the past or whatever you consider the future, but the feelings exist in the present moment. And you can change your feelings. Now, how can you change your feelings? With the feelings, as we grow older, here's what happens. We tend to accumulate stress without relieving it. We get the habit of maybe moving a little slower, not being so active, not participating in things that used to relieve our stress more when we were younger, and the stress gradually creeps up on us, and we confuse that with growing old. And all it is an accumulation of stress. Now there's so many different ways to relieve stress, and I'm going to give you the 3 easiest ones and possibly the most effective for most people if they'll do them. One is breathe more deeply. We often get tired, we can even get aches and pains, and we even emotional feelings can turn bad simply because we're breathing too shallow. Now we're breathing too shallow because of all the stress that built up not only in our heart but our lungs. That, there's muscles there, and our chest. And taking some time, not real deep fast stuff, just a few deep breaths once in a while, okay? And you're going to be amazed at how that will re-energize you, surprisingly. So deeper breathing on occasion is one good thing. The next thing, just as important, and I'll tell you how important in a moment, is hydration. We tend to dry out. Now here we are, not only, there's lots of places where the energy is so high that unless we do something about it, it will dehydrate us. And here we are on a volcanic island with a living magma below us in the tropics. This is a place where you can feel wonderful and excited when you first arrive and then go downhill if you don't hydrate. Okay? It's amazing, and we've surprised people all around the world with this. You get up in the pain, I get up in the morning, you got the aches and pains. If you take a full glass of water, most of them will go away instantly. It's usually dehydration through the night. Okay? It's just a simple thing. Deep breathing, hydration, and laughter. Not, a lot of people as they grow older tend to lose their sense of humor. They start looking at the worst side of life and the worst side of themselves and the people around them and forget to laugh. Laughter releases so much tension and it changes your feelings. It makes you feel better. I'm going to throw this one out because this is the thing that just had my wife and I laughing like mad if you haven't seen it. And I think it's available on YouTube, but there's a bit where Ellen DeGeneres is interviewing Meryl Streep. And one of the things she has Meryl Streep do just on the fly, she has these bits of paper and she hands them to Meryl Streep. There's a traffic report, there's a weather report, there's just things that don't have anything to them at all. And she has her do them in an acting way. For instance, give a weather report in a sexy voice. Another one was a traffic report, okay, as another type of a thing. And then Meryl Streep did one as an angry teenager that was just so funny. But there's lots of stuff. YouTube is full of funny stuff. I don't know if you have Facebook, my Facebook friends are full of funny stuff, okay? And getting as much laughter as you can in the day. That's why first thing Gloria and I read in the morning is the comics, okay? Get a laugh. It's really good for you. Next thing, to love, this is from Aloha, the deeper meaning. To love is to be happy with someone or something. Very Hawaiian concept. But to love is also to help someone or something. That's the active side. And so the thing here is, you can change your experience by increasing love. Now that sounds nice. How do you do that? Well, one of the things which is the most anti-love thing in the world is criticism. And if you can find some way to reduce your criticism and increase your appreciations, your body's going to feel better. Sometimes illnesses disappear when you really start putting your attention on that. Start doing a lot of forgiving because it happened a long time ago, so what? Okay? One of my favorite sayings is from an actress, I don't know how many remember her, Ingrid Bergman.
Yep.
And what she said was, the secret to happiness is a poor memory. Okay? You just don't dwell on that stuff. Okay? Forgive, appreciate, and I know it's not easy to do, but at least reduce the criticisms. And it's going to have a tremendous effect on how you feel and what you can do. It's going to help your memory too, boy, believe me. Now, all power comes from within, and everything has power. What does this mean here? The power we're talking about is your self-confidence and your physical strength. Self-confidence is something that you just have to decide to have. Decide to be confident about yourself. Part of that is not criticizing yourself a lot, but part of it is simply being confident in yourself, trusting yourself to, in any situation, to do the best you can. To be perfect, forget it. Okay? To do the best you can focus on that, and you can do that. Okay? The other part of it, your physical strength, that's going to make you feel better, and it's going to make you healthier. There was another experiment that was done with 60-year-olds and 30-year-olds. And it was a 6-week strength training. At the end of 6 weeks, it was a competition. The 60-year-olds beat out the 30-year-olds. They were stronger, and did they look good? Okay? They really looked good too. But they felt good. And increasing your physical strength is also part of feeling self-confident. Wonderful thing to do as part of increasing your own power. The last one on this, effectiveness is the measure of truth, and the measure of effectiveness is experience. How do we put this? If effectiveness is the measure of truth, how can you be more effective? One thing you can do is be a healer. Or maybe look at something you're doing as healing. Okay? There's all kinds of ways to be a healer. You can heal appliances. You can heal furniture. You can heal animals and plants. You can have a healing effect on people by painting and sharing your painting, poetry, something else. That can be looked at as healing work. You can also learn some kind of alternative healing technique if you want to and share that with people. But when you heal, well, let me put it this way. Healing with compassion heals you. Okay? Because you're connected when you're doing the healing. One of the finest ways, because you have to grow older. You don't have to grow old. Okay? Pao ka'olelo. The tale is told. Do we have any questions? Thank you. Do you have any comments or questions? Well, let's put it this way. While you're thinking of something, and it could be about this topic or it could be about Hawaiian culture if you like, we're going to do a couple things. We do a little healing blessing at the end. People from all over the world have brought pieces of nature. We used to call them stones, but some of them aren't. So these pieces of nature, we use them as a healing focus, and we'll be doing that. One of our staff will guide us at the end of this. So I'm asking you to pass this along. Just pick one out. Go ahead, take it. Yeah, okay. And you don't have to tune in. Let the object pick you. Works best that way. Okay. Now at the same time, this is a free meeting, and I want you to feel very comfortable with that. We have some projects that you might be interested in. In sharing the healing, one of the things we do at the entrance over there, where the redhead is sitting, we have these booklets, a pink one and a blue one. We give those out free. We mail them out to individuals all around the world, no matter where, at no cost. And one of them is a book on the spirit of aloha, how to use the power of blessing and appreciating and all that kind of stuff. Very healing. The other one is a fabulous healing technique called the Dynamind technique that is truly amazing. So we have them in booklet form. We have them on the internet for free in about 35 languages. And so anybody can download them there at no cost. That's one of the things we do. We also have a lot of free counseling, free distant healing, if you know anything about that. We have on our websites, one of them about sacred sites of Hawaii, but another one we have over 300 articles on this Huna knowledge and how to apply it. That's all for free. So if any of that interests you, I'm going to pass the calabash around if you want to share that. But, you know, feel comfortable. This is a free meeting. While these are going around, we can have questions, if anybody has any. Yes?
Do you teach the Huna process, the philosophy here, or more just
Okay, do we teach the Huna philosophy and the Huna process? We do have a process, yes. We have workshops here on Big Island. We have staff who teach workshops all around the world. So in most places you go, there'll be a teacher someplace. But we do them here too. We have this meeting where we teach specific things for free every first Sunday of the month. Our staff member who's dealing with the camera over there, Stuart Blackburn, he has a weekly Huna class in Kalani, near Seaview on the South Shore here. Okay? So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you about how you relate to death in the aging process, because eventually we are going to leave our bodies.
We're all going to die. Sure. And how you think about that is real helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. But we basically, we look at the roots of a Hawaiian word for death. And that's make.
Make.
And if we look at the roots of that word, we have a word that means move, ma'a, and usually move quickly, but anyway, move. And another word, ke'e, which means in another direction. Death is moving in another direction. And I just leave this thought for you to think about. You know who you are and you feel who you are. Your body, this physical body that you're using right now, physiologically, and this is science, has died multiple times since you were young. Every single cell, even your bones. Roughly you get a new body. It doesn't happen suddenly, but roughly you get a new body every year. Bones take quite a while. Skin every 6 weeks. Okay, that's where all your dust comes from in the house. Okay. Yeah, I know it doesn't sound good, but that's what it is. But overall, you have a new body and you still remember who you are. Now, the only difference when we die is that we're not going to replicate the body anymore. The consciousness is still there. That's how we look at it. Yeah.
Do you see that there is a reincarnational? Do you see that somehow the soul reincarnates in a new body?
If you like. The reason I say that is our first principle. Okay, the question, if you didn't hear it all, do we also believe in reincarnation, that we take a new body and a new life? The world is what you think it is. Your experience will follow what you believe. Okay? Personally, I believe reincarnation can explain a lot of things and it cannot explain a lot of other things. So on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I believe in reincarnation. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, I don't. On Sunday, I'm open. Depends. Okay. The thing about Huna is we don't say what has to be true. We have these ideas about how things work, and you can apply them any way you want to. Okay? So, if reincarnation works for you, that's wonderful. You'll know at some point. Anything else? Okay then. Stuart's going to do the blessing.
Aloha, everybody. And everybody has their piece of nature? Wonderful. So I invite you to start looking at it. Start feeling into it, to start enjoying it, to start appreciating it. There's no bad side. There's no wrong side. There's nothing to criticize about it. It's all just fine the way it is. It is what it is. And so it is with you. You can look at your life any way you like, but probably the nicest way is to say, well, I am the way I am. There's no wrong side. There's no bad side. There's no rough side and one polished side that's better than the other. It's all you. But I invite you now to close your eyes and to think about, first, some part of your life that you thoroughly enjoyed, that got you really excited. There was so much fun, so interesting, so energized. And just feel that for a few moments. Feel that joy. Oh my goodness. Wow. And that's still part of you. That's still here. There are some aspects of life that you have naturally had to let go of. You let go of the first set of teeth you had. You've let go of many things. And so as we grow older, we get used to letting go of some things. But we also gain new things. We have new experiences. And sometimes it's things like being more aware of the wonderful relationships that we have. And we get to put more importance on those relationships and get more pleasure out of those relationships. Yes, there are things that we let go of as we get older, but there are also things that we get to enjoy in new ways. So just like this piece of nature in your hand, there are some things that have broken off, that have left this piece of nature. It is not the same as when it was born millions of years ago, most likely. But it has changed. And it is still beautiful today. And it will be beautiful in many, many years to come. And I would suggest you take a moment to recognize that yes, you have changed, and yes, you will change, but that you will be beautiful for many, many, many more years. And when you truly feel that in your heart, open your eyes and come on back. Take that feeling home with you. And when you put this piece of nature back in the basket, give it a little bit of that feeling, a little bit of that energy with your breath. And I thank you all.
Mahalo.